everybody, this is Monica Duarte. I just wanted to come on here and just make an update video. Mainly because I'm doing a lot of inner work and healing, and some things are changing for me, and I'm just feeling inspired to talk about those things, mainly because it's going to change the kind of content and also my coaching practice and my focus. So if you know me, if you've been following me, you know that I am into spirituality. I've been on my spiritual path since 2010, and it all started after a near-death experience in a car accident, where after the car accident, when you are close to dying, you start to see life differently. And for me, I started to have these experiences after that, the spiritual experiences after that, that really shifted the way that I saw myself, and how I saw the world. So after that, like a year later or 2 years later, something like that, I ended up selling all my belongings. I was living in the Bay Area at the time, and I left everything I had created to go on my spiritual journey. I moved to Sedona, Arizona, and learned about a lot of different spiritual modalities, was really into that. I became an ordained minister. I was just really involved in that, and basically the New Age movement. And then in 2015, I went through a second near-death experience, and this time I learned that when you're holding on to dear life, some of those spiritual things I learned, they don't really work. They don't really help you. They help you feel better, when you are not in crisis. But when you're in crisis, at least for me, they didn't work. So, I pray because I've been having conversations with God since I was little. So I prayed for some kind of support, some kind of guidance. And this book called A Course in Miracles came into my life, and it kind of took me back to realizing that God was my priority, and that is the only being I want to be connected to. So everything shifted for me, and I started to make God a priority, like a main focus in my spiritual journey, Jesus as well, Holy Spirit. And I considered, going back to Christianity, because I was raised Catholic. I am confirmed, baptized, and what was the other? Confirmed, baptized, and I did my communion. So I've done all the Catholic things, and also, even before my spiritual journey, I had kind of explored Christianity, but more from like the Pentecostal type side. So I'm sharing that just so you know that I have a background with that. And so I was considering going back to that, but there's just still a lot of doubts that I had. I wasn't really sure. And part of that was because, in Christianity, there's the idea of hell, the devil, and there's a lot of blood. And for me, at least when I was little, when I lived in Mexico and I lived with my grandmother, she would take us to church every weekend. And for me, it wasn't necessarily like the most fondest experience that I had, because it was usually, talking about death and blood and just scary stuff, and being told that I'm bad and I'm gonna go to hell and God is angry. And so you have to know that, like, as a 3-year-old who's only been on the planet for 3 years, that stuff is scary. Like, that traumatizes you. So for me, like, I've hesitated because of those things. It's like, I don't want to, I don't really want to be connected to a God that's angry and that is telling me I'm bad and I'm gonna go to hell. Like, that's not really what my experience has been with God. And I don't feel that I want to feel bad about who I am and myself. Because first of all, I didn't create me, God created me. So why would God create something that's bad? And so anyways, for several years, I kind of hesitated to going back to Christianity. And so things are changing now. I've done a lot of inner work. I've done a lot of healing. I've healed from a lot of trauma. There's still some kind of healing. I think that trauma is like one of those things that can take years, your whole life to heal and process. And it's not just that, like doing this work has also helped me learn about myself. And that's always like lifelong journey. And that's why I keep doing this, because I'm just learning so many things about myself. But one thing that I did not expect by doing this work is that my relationship with God would become stronger. I wasn't really looking necessarily for that. I just was looking to heal. And I realized that the more that I was healing from trauma, the more that I could actually feel God's presence in me, in my heart. And Jesus and the Holy Spirit, I could feel them in me. And, I work with internal family systems or parts work. And one of the things that happens is like, you usually have an area where we have these internal parts. And when you work to help them process trauma, like the trauma that they've been holding for you, when you move them to a place where they can just be themselves and they can feel safe. And I have a place where I move all my healed parts and they all live there. And one day after I had worked to heal from a big trauma, I was doing inner work, doing this work, and I just saw God there. I just saw God there, living there. And like Jesus, like I would see him there, and that would be normal, like that was normal. But I literally just saw God there. And I know the idea of like seeing God sounds crazy because God is this big being, right? But God will show up for us the way that we need him to. And when I say him, like I don't necessarily feel like God is a man or a woman. God is a being, and he will show up however we need him to. And so to me, like I just saw God. I saw God. He would show up like kind of in the sky, and it would be a face that would show up. And my experience with him has been really different from the experience, of all the fear that you get from just, religion, like the Christian religion. And it's so interesting because I started to get to know God, like really get to know God for the first time in my life. And I will tell you, this has been my experience. So you do your own journey, do your own healing. You'll discover how God shows up for you. But for me, God is the most loving being. He is like so joyful and is laughing all the time. And like he will laugh for just like the simplest thing. And it makes me feel really happy, and it makes me want to laugh. And it just fills up my whole being with just like joy. And that's not at all what I got when I would go to church, and had these experiences. And so I guess what I'm feeling pulled to share is that I'm basically converting back to Christianity, but I'm learning how to navigate that in a way that works for me, in a way that God is guiding me to, and not the way that, people think of God as. And so I felt inspired to share some things that I've learned with as I develop my relationship with God. And I guess, I can start off with like sharing, I'm Mexican. I'm also indigenous. My great grandfather was Aztec, and my grandma, she's indigenous, but I don't know what tribe she was from. And one of the concerns that I had is that because I'm indigenous, indigenous people they're not really Christians. So for me, like I did have this conflict where it's like, wait, but like, people killed my ancestors because of Christianity, like because of Catholicism. Like they literally came to our land and just killed my ancestors because they believe different things. So how can I even be in resolve internally knowing that I'm doing this? It's not even in alignment with my lineage, And so that's something I'm learning to navigate. And like what I'm being told, what God is telling me is that even though um basically God does not have a religion and God existed even before Christianity existed. It wasn't something that like all of a sudden it showed up. You know, like God didn't just show up because of Christianity. Like God existed forever, and God existed even with my indigenous ancestors, although they called God a different word. They called it spirit or creator. And they were, you know, in some indigenous traditions, like they pray to different gods, but there were some indigenous traditions that pray to spirit, and that was like creation, right? And so when you look at it that way, like that's basically God. So basically, without going too much into it, because I'm still kind of discovering this, is like understanding that even though I have this indigenous like background, like God was still there. God didn't go away, and God didn't show up just because Christianity was created. So I'm learning how to navigate that part of me in a way that feels authentic to me. Another thing too that I wanted to share is I guess somebody posted a post. I guess a lot of people that were into the New Age movement are converting to Christianity because they're saying that the New Age movement, a lot of things are demonic. I understand where they're coming from, okay? Like, I don't know how, I want to be very careful here because I don't want to judge anybody. And when I'm sharing what I'm sharing, it's my experience and what I've learned. So I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm literally just sharing my experience. If it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. I'm not looking to argue or to prove anybody wrong or anything. I'm just sharing what I've experienced. So one of the things that I learned when I was in the New Age movement, and also from taking classes like to help develop my psychic skills, because I'm really intuitively, I pick up on things about people, and I've always been like this. And like for a while I didn't know how to manage it, where I wouldn't pick up on things about people like that I don't want to see, or things that I don't want to know. Like I don't need that, you know. So one of the things that people don't understand in the New Age movement is, you know, you go into spirituality and you think it's great because it feels good, but they don't realize like the spirit world is not better than this world. Just like there's people here that are, you know, they have good hearts, and there's people who are evil here, or they act in evil ways. In the spirit world, it's the same thing. There's spirits out there who are demonic, and spirits that are actually, you know, they're kinder, if you want to call it. And so a lot of the things going on in the New Age movement is that people are kind of just opening up to whatever, and they could actually be channeling or connecting to demonic spirits, or spirits that are spirits that are very lost. And there's a danger in that. Like you have to be very careful, like only because you want to be connect to the spiritual world, it doesn't mean you're gonna connect to like a good spirit. And you're literally like it's almost like you're gambling to see what you get. There's also spirits that feel good, and they will tell you things that make you feel good. They can tap into your history, into your like life, and know things about you. And those spirits are also demonic. So you have to be, again, very careful. Like, just like there's people out here who, you know, like I dated guys in the past who like, in the beginning, they were really nice and like, you know, whatever. And then they turn into a-holes. Like the same thing is on the other side. There's spirits that they will be nice to you and show you what you want. They want you to, what you want to see, and tell you what you want to hear. But that doesn't mean that they're actually like good. So my thing is that if you are opening yourself up to the New Age movement, there is a higher chance that you're opening up yourself to spirits that are not good. And you can get attachments that way. You can get lost. And so with that, I wanted to share something that has been very insightful for me, that because again, I I'm having these like connections with God, and I get messages, and I know they're coming from God because I know the energy. Like, I know the energy of what God feels like to me. And the idea of sin, that's a word that I have not liked forever, like as far as I can remember. And the idea of sin. And what God explained to me is that sin is basically when you separate yourself from God, you're sinning. And what that means is that, sin is basically you separating yourself from God, from our Creator. And what God shared with me is that we can never separate ourselves from God. We can never separate ourselves from our Creator. We can only create the illusion that we're separating ourselves. And so anything we do anything that we do where we create the illusion that we're separating ourselves from God, that's magic. Like anything how do I explain it? I don't know if I'm explaining it right. Magic is when you do anything that makes you believe that you're separated from God and that you are powerful in your own like self, that, God doesn't exist or whatever. Like, that's literally magic. And it's magic because magic is not real. Magic is an illusion. And the only thing that's real is that we are children of God, and nobody can take that from us. Nobody can tell us that we're not. Like, they can tell us that we're not, but it doesn't mean that they're right. And so when you're sinning, basically the idea is that you're doing something that is pulling you away from God. And one of the thing that like really, really was shown to me was when God said, like, I'm not concerned about people because everybody's gonna come back home in their own time. And what I received from this was that we can never be separated from God. We can only create the illusion we are. And the only choice that we have in our lives is how long we live in that illusion. So, like, it's almost like you're in a dream and you don't realize you're in a dream until you wake up and you realize, oh, that was a dream. So the only really choice that we have is how long we choose to be separated from God. But in the end, once we hit our heads against the wall enough, and it becomes really painful, that's when we'll be like, okay, I'm ready to come back home, God. So even the people that are the most evil, the people that are messed up, the people who are like believe in the devil or whatever, even everybody's gonna come back home eventually. The choice is how long you decide to wait for that. So you can decide, this lifetime I'm gonna come back home to my Creator, or oh, I'm gonna wait another lifetime or another lifetime or another lifetime. And just know that when you separate yourself from God, it's a painful thing to do because that's not natural to us. It's not natural for us to live that way. And so what inspired this wisdom for me was, again, trauma. Like, my thing is that because I've been through a lot of trauma, because of the trauma, I couldn't see that God was with me all along. Like, I could not see it. I couldn't feel it. I mean, I could to a certain extent, not like, it's not like I couldn't feel it at all. I could feel it to a certain extent, but it wasn't as strong. And so the trauma was blocking me from having this connection to God. And as I started to heal, I started to realize, like, God has always been there. Like, God has always been here. Like, God lives in my heart. Like, God literally lives in our hearts. But if our hearts are wounded, if our hearts have been broken, if we've been like, we're born into trauma, experienced trauma, it's almost like these walls that we build, to protect us. But when we do that, we also block God's love for us. And we can't feel it. And so we feel like we live in this like world. Like, the only way that I can explain it is like in a nightmare where we feel like God doesn't exist, God isn't real, like God is not in my life. But it's not until like I heal from the trauma that I realize like God has always been there. And it's really interesting how, because of that, like I can feel how much love God has for me, and God has always had for me. Like all, the terrible things that we think about ourselves, God doesn't think of those things about us. God does not see us that way. God sees us as like his children, like we're his like beautiful creations, and he only wants the best for us. And to realize like, oh my God, like this has been here all along, and I couldn't see it because of the trauma that I experienced. It's crazy. Like it's changed the way that I see myself, the way that I feel about myself, the way my connection with God, where I literally like I get insights, I get messages, and I know it's coming from him. And as I'm saying this, I can actually feel his presence right now. I can feel it. I want to start laughing because it's like I know he's right here, like. But it's crazy. To me, it's crazy going through this journey and realizing like God has never left us, and even the times that I've gone through crisis, meaning like the near death experiences, and I will be honest, I have had a lot of people in my life who have been abusive and disrespectful and unkind. And noticing how even in those times, it was God that directed me away from those people. Like, it wasn't me. Like, in some cases, I wanted to keep trying, and it was God intervened and blocked it from happening, because God is like, you're not going that way. You're not going to get lost. You're coming back home, lady. So, but even like being able to realize that like these are things that I did not realize before. I just felt like I was alone, like navigating the world by myself, and all of a sudden I'm like, God is like giving me like enlightenment. I don't want to even call it that. It's like a vision, understanding. I don't know what to call it, wisdom of what was actually happening, and that like I was never alone. And all I had to do was to heal internally so that I could see that and to feel God's love. And because of that, it's changed again the way that I feel about myself, the way that I think about myself, the people that I allow in my space, because I know God would never want anybody around me that would harm me or cause like abuse, disrespect, not any of that. Like, we're children of God. Like, we need to treat ourselves like we matter and we value. We're valuable because we're children of God, and that's really sacred. So the other thing too is like navigating back to like the whole Christian thing. And for me, like, I was struggling to understand, like, how do I go back knowing that I don't want to go back feeling like, going back to this whole idea of like, oh, I'm a sinner, or like, oh, I'm after I've done all this work and I've discovered God and I realize like I'm, like God loves me and, respects me and doesn't want me to do anything that would harm me. Like, why would I go back to a religion that would tell me that I'm bad? And so one of the things that happened, and this is really powerful, is that I had a coaching session, and in my coaching session, I was discovering this to understand this more. The other thing, the other being that shows up for me is Jesus. Like, I've had dreams with Jesus since I was little, and basically he's my guide. Like, even if I didn't want him to be my guide, like, there's nothing that I can do about it, because God has made it very clear, like, that's who I put for you to guide you. So you can't do anything about it. And I love him. Like, I love Jesus. He's like amazing. But in this like coaching session that I had a vision, and Jesus said to me, what matters most is what's in your heart. Because I had this conflict, right? And when I heard that, like, what I felt is like, if you go to church, all that matters is what's in your heart. Don't worry about following these things and that and the terminology and all that stuff. Like, that doesn't matter. What matters is what's in your heart and why you're going back. What matters is, if you want to go back to Christianity, what matters is what's in your heart that's guiding you to go back. Focus on that and let me take care of everything else. Don't worry about the details. Don't worry if you do something wrong. Don't worry if you think you're just being disrespectful or whatever. Like, allow me to guide you. And if you're doing this for your love for God, do it. See it that way. See going to church as like a celebration of God, not this like, scary, like dark thing, but like a celebration of your love to God. And, doing these things, like, see them as a celebration instead of like the way that I was raised to around, So that really changed things for me. And ever since then, which just happened like, when was it? Either this week or last week, which is I just feel like this is the path for me and I'm going back, but I'm discovering it in a different way, and I'm rediscovering it in a different way, and I'm allowing God to guide me in the process instead of what I was brainwashed to believe and think about God and, like the religion. And I wouldn't necessarily call myself religious. I don't think I would go that far. I definitely would consider myself Christian, but as far as like religious, like I don't know if I would call myself that, because again, my priority and my focus is God, and anything that's not of God, I don't want anything of that around me. I just don't. Like, I'm not interested in it. Like, that has not done anything to help me heal or anything. It hasn't. In fact, it was God who brought internal family systems into my life, because at that time I was going through a really dark time in my life, and I prayed to God, and like literally like a few weeks after that, my therapist that I've been working with for like a year and a half came into my life, and that's what he did. And I had never heard of internal family systems. And I know that God put him there because I had a dream about this happening before it happened. And for me, like, God communicates in my dreams. So I know it was a divine thing, and I'm very grateful because God knew what I needed to help me, and it's helping me. And now I'm using it to help other people, to help them heal internally, to heal their hearts, to heal from the trauma that they've experienced, so they too can feel free from all the pain and suffering and just reconnect back to our Creator. And again, that was not even the intention. It just happens naturally. So with that being said, I'm feeling a really strong pull to not necessarily promote myself as a spiritual coach. I feel like, I guess the way that I feel is like the work that I do is in itself spiritual, and I don't have to be putting that out there. And I don't really want to, again, don't disrespect. I don't really want to be in like around like too many woo-woo things. And I know when people think about spirituality, like that's the first stuff that comes up, and I just don't want to be around that. So I'm mostly focusing now like on like trauma work and doing like basically internal work, trauma work. And one of the other things that I'm helping people with is also with their goals. But the thing that I love about the work that I do is that it's all internal. So you actually have to go inside yourself to heal and to, heal internally, to learn how to heal yourself internally. We say like it's yourself, but it's not yourself, because it's actually God healing you. We just don't know that. We don't, I see it that way. At least that's how I see it. And then, the coaching stuff, like you go internally to find awareness. And to me, doing those two things is a spiritual practice of its own. And it's a very profound practice because you're going internally, and that's where God lives. God does not live outside. And the other thing I wanted to say too, like another reason why I kind of stopped with the New Age stuff is because, again, a lot of people use the New Age movement to seek for guidance, to feel better, to heal through external things like crystals. And I love crystals, and I spend so much money on crystals, and now I'm like, I don't even know what to do with them. Like, I can't, like, I like them. I'm having a conflict with them anyways. That's what I'm trying to say. But my thing is that God does not live in a rock. God doesn't live in tarot. God doesn't live in any of these things. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. God doesn't live in these things. God lives in us. And so if we really want to access God, we need to learn how to go internally. And in order to do that, in order to access God, we need to heal from trauma, because our trauma blocks us. Whether it's like trauma that you experienced from, life, trauma that you've experienced that you inherited from your ancestors, from your family. When you heal that, you start to remove everything, like all the garbage, all the stuff that's not you. And the more that you do that, the more that you start to discover your true self. And in discovering your true self, you find God. And so that's what I'm trying to say is I'm in this space in my life where I don't want to be distracted by things that are not where God doesn't live. Although one thing that I will say is that God is very wise and God uses things that we wouldn't even think about as a way to guide us back home. And it happened for me in my journey, like at Course in Miracles, I got into that and it came into my life at the right time. And, some people will say, oh, that wasn't written by, Jesus was not, whatever. Jesus was not the one that was speaking through that book. It was the Spirit, whatever. But that's what I needed at that time in order to get closer to God. So what I'm saying is don't underestimate God, because God knows what you need in your heart to bring you back home. And when you come home, I don't know how to explain it. When you come home, it's not at all what you thought. It's a very, very peaceful place. It's a very loving place. It's just, I feel very whole and very at peace, and I feel good about myself. I feel really different. And at this point in my life, I don't let people walk all over me or treat me poorly or any of that. And that's because God is you wouldn't, you're my child. Why would you allow yourself to be treated that way, And in the past, it's maybe I allowed that because of all the trauma that I have experienced, all the brainwashing and stuff from people. And so when you heal yourself again, you come back home and God will correct you on the right path for valuing yourself as a person, loving yourself as a person, respecting yourself, and living a life that is authentic to you and that is in alignment with God's will. So anyways, this is kind of a long video, but I just wanted to share because again, I can't talk. It's late, you guys, sorry. This is just something that is really important to me. And I know maybe some folks may not like what I have to say, but this is what I've learned. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I really do value my experience. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. And if you're interested in the work that I do, please reach out. I'm specifically looking to work with individuals or driven Latinas or trauma survivors. And I'm still offering some a special type of program, if you want to call it that. Basically because I'm still doing some research because I really want to hone my marketing. So I'm offering a free session or complimentary session in exchange to kind of pick your brain, to get more wisdom and understanding of how what I offer can support you in your journey. So if you consider yourself a driven Latina or a trauma survivor and you're interested in this, please reach out to me. And we can get something set up for that, and you get to experience either doing the trauma work or doing the goal coaching, so you can see if that's something you would like to explore more. So that's all I have to share. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.